This was the healthcare repeal Obamacare vote that was due to happen today. And this morning, Ilya Ponomarev, he was on his way to a meeting. He was going to meet another former Russian member of parliament who has just been denounced as a traitor to Russia, who has just been threatened with criminal fraud charges. Ilya Ponomarev, the lone vote against Russia taking Crimea, he was due to meet this morning in Kiev with Denis Voronenkov. And on his way to that meeting, Denis Voronenkov got murdered in the street. Here's the New York Times description of what happened. Quote, for a contract murder, a common occurrence in former Soviet countries, usually executed with precision, for a contract murder, this killing in Kiev was unusually bloody and chaotic. The assassin opened fire with what police said was a TT pistol, a Soviet-era design, and Mr. Voronenkov's bodyguard fired back. In total, police say the two fired at least 20 shots a few yards apart, leaving blood and shell casings scattered around the sidewalk. The bodyguard was shot in the chest, but survived. The assassin was captured after sustaining a head wound, but he later died. And Mr. Voronenkov, the target of the hit, he was shot 4 times and died at the scene. Quote, hours later, the body of Mr. Voronenkov, his tan dress shoes still protruding from a black tarp. Hours later, his body remained on the spot as police investigated. A Russian lawyer due to testify in that U.S. case, a Russian money laundering and fraud case. That lawyer mysteriously took flight out of a 4th-floor window at his Moscow apartment on Tuesday. He's the family lawyer of Sergei Magnitsky, who was murdered in prison in Russia in 2009 after his part in exposing a $250 million fraud case involving Russian officials. That $250 million fraud and the trail left behind by that money, investigators are still following that trail. But who knows if Nikolai Gorokin will be able to testify after all in any of those cases after his mysterious fall from that apartment block on the 4th floor this week. We've got an interview tonight with a key player in that case as Nikolai Gorokin fights for his life in a Russian hospital. So this is the split screen we've got to have now in understanding our own American news. All right, the investigation into Putin's attack on our election and the possible cooperation of the Trump campaign in that attack, that investigation may be starting to fall apart in the House of Representatives because of the Republican leadership of the Intelligence Committee there. Congressman Devin Nunes reportedly apologized to his committee today for his behavior in that case yesterday, which has seriously called into question whether somebody like him, a member of the Trump campaign and the Trump transition, can actually lead that investigation. The FBI investigation continues, of course. CNN now reporting that FBI investigators are focusing increasingly on the evidence they have found about Trump campaign collusion with the Russians. This is a fascinating scandal in our own politics, and there's new stuff uncovered in it in our own news every single day. But this is not just an American story anymore. There is a Supreme Court nominee on the bubble. There's the biggest healthcare policy in generations teetering tonight. There's a new protest movement in this country that is changing the whole ground truth of political dynamics in America. But at the other end of the biggest political scandal we've got, that is as yet unresolved for us, it really is murder. Over and over and over again, it's murder. We are dealing with something very, very, very dark. Stay with us. It's very dangerous business being an opponent of Vladimir Putin's. The man who mysteriously plummeted 4 stories from his apartment building in Moscow on Tuesday, Nikolai Gorokin, he's the lawyer for Sergei Magnitsky's family, who are still seeking justice for his death. Mr. Gorokin was due in court the very next day after he was thrown or fell out of that 4th-floor window. He was due in court to represent the Magnitsky family. He's also due to testify in May in New York in a Russian money laundering case brought in federal court by Preet Bharara's office. But right now, he's in the hospital with serious injuries, and joining us now is Bill Browder. He's the author of Red Notice, a true story of high finance, murder, and one man's fight for justice. Mr. Browder, I know you have stayed up to a terrible hour of the night to be with us tonight from Britain. Thanks very much for joining us.
Good to be here.
Let me just ask you the basics of if you know how Mr. Gorokin how he is. I mean, a fourth floor window is not a good place to start. It's remarkable to me that he survived this fall.
Yeah, it's truly remarkable. So when we got the news that he fell down 4 stories, he's a 53-year-old man. I assumed the absolute worst 2 nights ago. And the next day, sort of about 24 hours later, I got the news that he is in serious condition, but no longer critical condition. So
wow.
Nikolai has survived the fall. He's got all of his mental facilities. He's not paralyzed. He's got a few broken bones, but it looks like this man went down 4 stories and survived, which is just a miracle.
To hear. I have to ask you though, just personally, with your activism and the way you have spoke out on this issue and the way that you have advocated so aggressively on this subject for these years now, are you worried about being targeted?
Very, very much so. I am targeted. I've been threatened on a number of occasions by the Russian government, by agents of the Russian government. I've received threats directly and indirectly. They're coming after me, but I have a duty to Sergei Magnitsky, my lawyer who was murdered 7 years ago, to get justice for him, and I'm not going to back down from these threats. It's my duty to go after the people who killed him.
Bill Browder, Chief Executive of Hermitage Capital Management, the author of Red Notice, a true story of high finance, murder, and one man's fight for justice. You're having breakfast, if you're still up right now, in terms of their second bite at that apple. We will see you.